Professor Philip Rolnick is going to be addressing us next. He is a professor of theology at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. He's also an adjunct professor at the St. Paul Seminary School of Divinity, as well as the director of Science and Theology Network. He is a member of Notre Dame's Seminar on Human Distinctiveness, Princeton's Center for Theological Inquiry, the Pollyanny Society, and the Academy of Catholic Theology. His books include Analogical Possibilities, How Words Refer to God, Person, Grace, and God, Origins, God, Evolution, and the Question of the Cosmos, which my wife actually just read within the last year and found to be an excellent book. Recommend to you. His most recent book, The Long Battle for the Human Soul, published just 3 years ago, Baylor University Press, is the first of 3 volumes of a trilogy titled Post-Christendom Faith. The forthcoming volumes are entitled Tradition Awakening and Theology in the Wilderness. Rolnick has also published articles and book chapters on the Trinity, analogy, personhood, creation, and C.S. Lewis. Some of his work has been translated into German, Russian, and Croatian, which is a testimony to just how widely relevant it is. And so he's going to be speaking to us today about the Trinity, its profound and ongoing value, helping us to connect these deepest truths of our faith with matters of relevance for our everyday lives. And I think that's really his forte in so much of what he's published as well. So please join me in welcoming Professor Philip Rolnick.
Thank you so much, RJ, and thank you, Stephen Hipp, for organizing this remarkable conference, and my thanks to Christendom College. It's my first time here. It's beautiful, the chapel's beautiful, the experience is beautiful, and I know that you only get a place like this with a great deal of support from devout people who love the Catholic educational endeavor. So thanks to all of you for supporting this. The first century evangelists, the apostles of Christ after the resurrection, they weren't thinking in terms of Christology. They weren't thinking in terms of Trinity. Their task was urgent, was to evangelize the world. They did it beautifully. They succeeded. But they left many questions unanswered. Questions that the church continued to wrestle with for a long time. But the first issue is what we call Christology, your understanding of Christ. Who was Christ? How did people understand Christ? The biblical writers understand Christ. How did people understand him in the first century and the second century? So the Christological question is the one Jesus asks to the apostles when they go to Caesarea Philippi. And he says, first, who do people say that I am? That's a safe question. What are those other guys saying? It's like ratemyjesus.com or something, you know. And then, but he turns to them, and you can imagine his finger pointing up, but who do you say that I am? That question's not safe. It's very direct. It rings through the centuries, and everybody has to answer it. I have to answer it. You have to answer it. The fact that we're here, we seem to have answered it a certain way. But that's the question. That is the determinative question. And the question gets answered on the Mount of Transfiguration in the Gospel of Mark when God the Father says, "This is my Son, listen to him." And in the Gospel of Matthew, Peter answers it by saying, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus looks at him and says, "Simon Bar-Jonah, you didn't get this from human sources. My Father informed you of this." And he said, "Upon this rock I will build my church." Now, this Christology, this confession that you are the Son of God, that's what launches the Trinitarian search, the Trinitarian question, the Trinitarian debates. So let's go into the problems that it raised, because to say, okay, we now believe Jesus is the Son of God. But what does it mean that he's the Son of God? Primary question, is he equal to the Father or is he subordinate to the Father? Now, many Christians, including parishioners, secretly think, well, the Father's really the number one, and then the Son and the Spirit are kind of subordinate. And so that was Arius' position, basically. So that's not what Trinity does. Trinity does something far, far more difficult. Now, here's the great difficulty, which you see up there, this divine simplicity. Simplicity is not simple. It's not easy to understand in that sense. But all the players in the debate, those who took the position that the church eventually took, like Athanasius, and those who argued against it, like Arius, everybody agreed that God must be simple. So this is a metaphysical claim that everybody understood about God, everybody agreed about God. It really means an intensive oneness, which there's no parts in God. There's no internal composition or division. Simplicity says that this intensive unity, which of course would be associated with the number one, is God. Now, religiously, as you see, if you can see the screen, can you see the screen at the bottom all right there? Okay. The Shema, the great prayer of Judaism says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." So religiously, this most important prayer of the Old Testament, the Shema, is affirming what the metaphysics of simplicity is affirming. Now, Father David Burrell once said to me that, and when the Jews said that, it wasn't like they were saying, well, we've just got one, and those Greek guys have 40 or so, They were saying that. But they were also talking about an intensive unity to the divine being. And it's that intensive unity that seemed to be threatened by talk of Trinity. So if you say Father, Son, and Spirit, and you start saying, well, they're equal somehow, it looks as if you are contradicting the Shema and you are contradicting the doctrines of simplicity, which everyone wanted to uphold. So you can have these objections to Trinity. The first objection famously was from Arius, who could quote scripture like Colossians 1:15, and they say that Christ is the firstborn of all creation. But if he's born, he goes through change. He's not simple. Therefore, he can't be equal to the Father, which was simplification of Arius' position, but it's something like it, and many, many followers of Arius. Now, Islam, if you want to understand Islam, and I've struggled to, I finally came to it by reading Robert Louis Wilkins' book, The First 1,000 Years, and it was really almost entirely an objection to Trinity. They're trying to uphold this intensive oneness, this sense of unity, this simplicity of God. So you see the quote there, he did not beget and is not begotten. Little punch to the Christians, at the Christians there. And none is his equal. At the other extreme, you could have three gods, tritheism, so-called. Now, what the church did, and it took a long time to do it, and it took a lot of work to do it, and we're still working on it in conferences like this, is to come up with a counterintuitive path between the extremes that could uphold both the intensive unity but also diversity, as Stephen Hipp was just ending with, as I heard a few moments ago. Now, on the way to looking for an answer to this question, the church came upon an unexpected treasure. And that treasure was the concept of the person. They weren't looking for that, but that's what came up, and the development of the concept of the person and the development of the Trinitarian doctrine pretty much go hand in hand. So let's press on. All right, now this is the way I'm presenting it for you. Picture a two-sided ledger in a book, and on one side you have all these great things like right here. Well, I'm missing the screen. Okay, is it here? All right. You have on the left side of the screen there simplicity, and what affirms simplicity are words like ousia, being from the Greek, substance, substantia from the Latin. So when we say that that the Son is consubstantial with the Father. We're on the simplicity side. Essence, nature. Now there's some important distinctions among those substance, essence, nature, but for our purposes today, let's say they're a cluster. They're a closely related cluster. We'll say they're all on the side of simplicity. The other side, this is where the church's innovation takes place, is hypostasis or prosopon, Greek words that can mean person now, and persona, the Latin and our English word person. So who did it? Well, first it was the Cappadocians, Basil, Gregory of Nyssa, and Gregory Nazianzen. These three somehow, what a threesome they were. They came up with the notion that you had to take a former synonyms, ousia and hypostasis. These were equivalent terms previously. They were used synonymously. And he said, no more. We have to make a distinction between them. So they really just almost out of whole cloth said, we're not going to do that anymore. And they create, it's really a neologism, but they created a whole new use for the word hypostasis. Now this innovation is what is going to lead the church to its formula of one being, one ousia, three hypostases, three persons. But that becomes the key, but it also, as you'll see in a moment, confused Augustine in some important ways. The boldness of what these Cappadocians did is all the more remarkable when you consider that one of the anathemas at the very end of the Council of Nicaea, the postings of Nicaea, anathematized anyone who contends that the Son of God is from another hypostasis or ousia. So the Cappadocians are distinguishing, they're daring to distinguish what even the Council of Nicaea was still equating. All right, on to, let's take a quick dash through the history and then we'll get to the value of all this. So first, Augustine, he takes this Christological principle, which is great. You have the divine nature and the human nature, and what the church said was don't mix up the natures. Don't confuse them, don't mix them up. So, but unify them, by the way, in one person. All right, now he transposes that same principle to the Trinity. He says, but here his rule is not to confuse or mix up the persons. Don't confuse the Father with the Son or the Son with the Spirit. All right, now he's trying to avoid three problems, what's called modalism, where the Son is just a mode of the Father and the Spirit is just a mode of the Father. So the oneness, it was a very weak way to try to keep the simplicity, the oneness, and that was a heretical position in the 2nd century. So he's avoiding that, and he's also trying to avoid tritheism, and he's also trying to avoid Arian subordinationism. All right, now one of Augustine's great contributions was about the category of relationship. Aristotle, who looms large above all these discussions, as does Plato, said that everything had to either be a substance or an accident. An accident would be like how tall you are. So if your son is 6'1" and he grows 2 inches, he's now 6'3". So the accident is his height. It doesn't mean you bump into each other. It's a technical term. But in that sense of accident, an accident always inheres in a subject. So either subject or accident. But Augustine said, well, let's not get tied down. And he said, to think through this, we can do this in such a way that what we're talking about is neither substance nor accident. So he takes the category of relationship and he says, quite sensibly, that a relationship can't relate nothing. There has to be something there that's getting related. So every being that's called something by way of relationship is also something besides the relationship. So you can't just say, well, the Father's a relationship, he says. It's got to be something in himself as well. All right, so Augustine, though, had a problem, and this is the translation problem, a very famous one. He said the Greeks have this word hypostasis, which we call person now, but they make a distinction that's rather obscure to me between ousia and hypostasis. Remember, they were formerly synonyms. So that most of our people who treated these matters in Greek are accustomed to say, mia ousia, tres hypostases, one being, three persons. Now here's his problem, as you can see there. Hypostasis, stasis is standing and hypo is under, so it literally means standing under, and substantia literally means standing under. So he absolutely is confused, and he's right to be confused about how the Greeks are now creating a distinction between these terms. So the great Augustine took a stumble here. Now, if we go back to that conceptual two-sided ledger, this is the only way I know to prevent the stumbles. But that's what the Cappadocians were asking for, but translating it from Greek to Latin was still very, very difficult. So he continues to translate. When they say three hypostases, he continues to translate it as three substances or persons. Now, can you see why saying three substances when you're talking about the Trinity is going to be a problem? All right, all of a sudden it looks like you're messing with divine simplicity, you're messing with the unity of God, and nobody wanted to do that, including Augustine. So he said, all right, this is hard, but he said, I don't want to, quote, be reduced to silence. So he affirms unity and diversity, and he says, it's very good that he says this, he says, well, maybe it's better to say three persons than three substances. Good. But then he says, this is bad, the Greeks could also say three persons, that is tria prosopa, three, it's another word for person, just as they say three substances, tres hypostases. And that's where we have a bit of a stumble. All right, so now what happens let's move this ahead, when a genius loves God, because this is a real genius and a real lover of God. Well, he gets the unity, he gets the diversity, and he really has a hard time cutting loose from the equivalence of hypostasis and substantia. So he forthrightly declares, and I quote, I will pass over this. Now, what's going to happen in this history we're going to jump into right now is others like Richard of St. Victor and St. Thomas will engage what he passes over and develop it. All right, now Boethius is an important part of this story. Boethius, very strongly influenced by Augustine. Now, he says, as you can see, their person cannot be, you can't predicate it apart from nature. You can have a God nature that's a person, you can have an angel nature that's a person, and you can have a human nature. But you got to have some nature and some relationship between nature and person. Now, this more or less suggests an analogy that he's going to work analogically. But Boethius is unable to develop the analogy because of his own great definition. Now, this definition that you see up there, this is the definition. This is probably the most famous definition for hundreds and hundreds of years. Everybody cited this definition. It just kind of was the great giant in every room of Trinitarian discussion. So the definition, an individual substance of a rational nature. Well, that works fine for an individual human. It works fine if you're in a Christological discussion. But you can see right away from what we've already done, if you apply that to the Trinity, you're going to end up with three, strong three, and you can't do it. So he runs into some predictable difficulties. So here it is. He's discussing the Trinity in one of his works, and he says there's one ousia or ousiosis, that is one essence or subsistence of the Godhead, but three hypostases, that is three substances. And that's the because you can't have three substances. So that's what messes up we really need that two-sided ledger, and that fouls it up again. Now, the same Boethius that gave everybody this famous definition, also in a less well-known work, although scholars know it, came up with a term when that will be the key to developing the Trinitarian analogies, and that's a term in Latin incommunicabilis, or in English term incommunicability, meaning that what you are, who you are as a person, is only you. So RJ, whatever RJ is, RJ-ness. Now, in a sense, you talk about RJ as a man, and everybody's got that. Everybody's a man or a woman, yeah, and that's our nature. But there's something about RJ that's only RJ, and it can't be anybody else. That's you can have children and communicate human nature. Do you have children, RJ? Okay, good. How many children do you have? 7. Very good. Way to go. It's doing ontology. And but what RJ is and what I am and what each of you is, this is incommunicable. And now we're really hitting the great treasure that the church almost stumbled upon, this development of what it means to be a person. And it's going to be this incommunicability. All right, so moving on to Richard of St. Victor. This guy is very exciting. I think he'd be a bit like the Apostle Peter if he was, except he's more intellectual. You know, he gets excited about things and he writes about love, and it's just everybody, very, very serious people writing these things, you know. But Richard is like, you know, you can imagine a guy flailing his arms while he's speaking. That's got to be Richard. You know, he's exciting and he's excitable. So he comes up. He takes this term of Boethus's, incommunicabilis, and he says that's the one we're going to develop. He said you can't talk about substance and person. You can't do that individual substance of a rational nature. So he rejects substance talk for person, and he strongly embraces the incommunicability, and then he's able to really get a robust Trinitarian explication off the ground. Okay, so he says, when you think about a person, it's answering a different kind of question than when you're thinking about substance. Substance answers the question, quid, or what. Person answers the question, who, quis. And so he said, he's keeping the two-sided ledger. This is he's got great instincts. And when Aquinas has to answer objections, as you'll see in just a moment, he goes to Richard. He has criticisms of Richard, but when he needs them, he employs them. Okay, on to St. Thomas. Now, this is a magnificent achievement. Boethus, on a bad day, proclaimed, relation cannot be predicated at all of God. St. Thomas boldly, daringly goes in the other direction, and he says, and I quote, in God, relation and essence do not differ from each other, but are one and the same. Now, what Thomas has done there, it's a stroke of pure genius, it really is, and daring. He's run right into the one thing everybody else was running away from, simplicity. He runs right into it, and he says, if we're going to talk about relations in God, then it's got to be the whole thing. It's got to be the entire essence of God. So the relation, the divine relations, and the divine essence are, quote, one and the same. So in one fell swoop, he solved a problem that nobody in the Latin West had solved. This is monumental. Okay, so he has now given us a convincing marriage for the first time of simplicity and Trinity, and he takes he gets into something of a victory lap there, you know, and it's all very good. But the key is relation and the divine essence are one and the same. There are very few words that apply analogically to God, like being, true, good. And Thomas adds relation. It really is monumental, the achievement. And you say, afterwards, you say, well, of course, but the first time I read it, I think I fell off my chair. I was so stunned. It was so beautiful. So, on to the next part here. Now, he's taking on an objection. You know, he always lists objections, positions he disagrees with. And one of the objections is whether you can call God person as though God were an individual. And he cites Boethus' definition with favor, like everybody else does. But to answer the objection, he just drops Boethus, and he moves to Richard of St. Victor, and he says, God can, quote, be called an individual only in the sense in which individual implies incommunicability. So now this incommunicability is being applied to Father, Son, and Spirit. Now as he continues the encounter, it looks like he's going to go back to Boethus and patch things up, but he never does. What he does, he lets the objections stand, and he defends the use of person in God with Richard's alternative definition, and I quote, "Person in God is the incommunicable existence of the divine nature. At the critical point of testing, Aquinas is unwilling to defend the understanding of divine persons in Boethus' substance terms, and he moves to Richard's incommunicability." Okay, now this is the punchline. How's our time, RJ? Okay, so the value of the Trinity. Well, the first value is Arius had a very logical position, but there's something more than logical. It's not less than logical. It's really more than logical in the path that the church went down. That's the first thing. The second is that it protects the transcendence of God. As Father Wynandy was saying, there's a mystery here, and when you understand a mystery, you understand something you really understand something. It's not like you're in total darkness. You're just, I don't know. No, you understand something, but you understand that there's way, way more to understand, and you have that experience every time you advance in understanding. That's the nature of the mystery, and that's part of the value of the Trinity. We never completely get our arms around it. We can grasp aspects of it, but we never get the whole thing. Okay, so there's three analogies I want to press with you in the time we have. First, that person distinguishes. Person relates and person unifies. Now we're going to do another two-sided ledger. This time the ledger is divine on one side, and we'll start with that, human on the other side. And what we say about God will help us understand some things about ourselves, and what we say about ourselves will cast some light back on what we can understand about God. All right, so person distinguishes. This is part of the great value. On the God side, the Father is Father and not Son, and the Spirit is Spirit and not Son, and so forth. So whatever you say about the Father can be said about the Son, except that the Son is Son and not Father, and likewise with the Spirit. On the human side, the distinction of each person is theologically precious because it intensifies the uniqueness that each one of us has, the uniqueness for a relationship. So I am unique, my wife is unique, so we have a uniqueness here, a uniqueness there, and our relationship is unique. This would be true in every friendship as well. This is the great value for us of the distinctiveness. So each relationship between persons multiplies what's already valuable. All right, now there's also moral implications. Whatever you do in your life, whatever you achieve, or conversely, whatever you fail, and most of us are a mixed picture of that, but it belongs to you. It's your story, it's your incommunicability. That's who you are. It's your morality, it's your character. And then finally, a comparison that might highlight all this. It's common Eastern teaching. What happens when you die? Like drop of water, become one with ocean. And the first time I heard that, I was so disappointed. I said, I don't want to just become a drop of water that becomes one with ocean. I want to work all my life, and then the afterlife, I want to be me. And that's the beauty of the Christian teaching of resurrection, but it's based on the Christian teaching about that each person is incommunicable. Each person is distinct. And this grows out of these Trinitarian debates. Okay, so second analogy, person relates. God the Father has to be the Father of someone, and likewise the Spirit has to be someone's Spirit. Now, in the divine case, relationship is not external to the divine being. So Christians are making an innovative claim, which is there's one being in the universe in whom relationship is internal, Father, Son, and Spirit. and that's God. Now, this claim is going to have tremendous value. It's part of the theological treasure that continues to pay dividends. Because you can't have love if it's just me, myself, and I, but you can have love, it's Father, Son, and Spirit. Now, John Paul II applied this to the human family. He says, okay, the Trinity is the eternal, infinite, perfect relationship. He said, but the gospel of Christ is about relationship. It's about our relationship to God and our relationship to all other human people. And then he went to the primordial model of the family, which is to be sought in God himself and the Trinitarian mystery of his life. The divine we is the eternal pattern of the human we, especially of that we formed by the man and woman created in the divine image and likeness. Now he says you can only do this in truth and love. So our families have to be formed in truth and love. And in the kind of grotesque culture wars we are now involved in, the family is right at the tip of the spear. That's where the battle is being played out in so many different ways. All right, now on to relationships. One other thing about relationships. Because God is Father, Son, and Spirit, relationships are paramount. And in every human relationship, every single one we have, it's sacred. And this becomes part of what St. Thomas called, and I quote, the fellowship of eternal happiness. This is where we're not only in relationship to God, we are in intense relationship with each other. And on to the third and final analogy, trying to press this value of the Trinity. Person unifies. Now this one's important, especially on the human side, for casting light on how different the divine unity is and how we're not tri-theists. We don't believe in three gods. We really are monotheists. And we really can protect simplicity. So, for the divine persons, unity is a state of being. They're not working at it. That's just the way they are. So the Father is God. In the shield that Stephen showed, the picture that, do you remember that? Okay, that's a really beautiful picture because it says the Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit is God. That's an absolutely unique kind of unity. So how God is the Son? Infinitely so. Is there any part of God that the Son's like? No, except paternity. Is there any part of God that the Spirit? No. He's got all of the truth, all the goodness, all the beauty of the Father are in the Son and in the Spirit. So this is unique. Now, on the human side of the ledger, if you switch over to that imaginary second ledger we have, we couldn't say that I am human nature. We could say I have human nature. I've got a part of it. I participate in human nature. I have a part. This means I can increase my part. That's like a moral command of Christ, to get better in truth, get better in goodness, get better in beauty. So we can increase our part. We can and should work on our unity. And sometimes we say things like, well, I feel like I'm falling apart because my unity's going to pot. I'm losing my unity. Things are hitting me too hard. So unity for us is a quest. Unity for God is a state of being. But by putting it that way, by seeing us as participating in the unity that God already is, then it helps us see the absolute intensity of the unity. So we don't give anything away on simplicity by talking about Father, Son, and Spirit in this unique way I've tried to do. And finally, we'll end with this. A term I've coined called Trinitarian Simplicity. This is, I think, a monumental achievement of centuries of great figures in Christianity who worked on this. It's monumental because simplicity looked like that was it. It was just there. Everybody understood it. By engaging the Trinitarian debates and developments, the church actually improved upon simplicity. So Trinity now signals to us about the personal nature of meaning and truth. Concept of the person underlies every single significant Christian doctrine. I can't think of one that if you uncover it, it's really about persons. We care about persons. This is a treasure that came up. The church took the difficult, counterintuitive path and found the inestimable value of the Trinity. And this has led us to the great Christian synthesis, Trinitarian Simplicity. So thank you, RJ.
Thank you very much, Professor Rolnick, for such a profound and clear presentation. We have about 5 minutes for questions. If anybody has a question that they'd like to ask, there's a microphone in the back of the room. Please feel free to come right up to the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Timothy, and I have to say, welcome to Sister Timothy. Sister Timothy was a longtime professor at our graduate school. In fact, I took her job when I came 14 years ago. So I'm very delighted that she is back with us today from the Franciscan Sisters of the Eucharist.
It's a great privilege, and I thank you so much for your presentation. I just wonder if in terms of Trinity, where John says God is love, and then we come to the whole question of in us, if love is Trinity, Richard of St. Victor, I think, had a tremendous insight on what you've been saying, but why God has to be more than just one. Why three? I think it helps in understanding human love. But would you have something to say on Richard of St. Victor's great insight?
Oh, thank you for that question, Sister. Yes. And if you have anything else to say, feel free to chime in.
Thank you.
Okay. So Richard's argument, I'm going to simplify it and summarize it as quickly as I can. It's well, like I say, it's a lot of fun, it's exciting, and it's reasonably long, but this is the gist of it, if I can boil it down. He said, well, okay, if God is love, as Sister was saying, then would it make sense for God to be totally just alone, himself, in this perfect being? Aristotle had something like that picture. And Aristotle's deity was kind of unconcerned with the world and how it worked. But the Christian God, of course, is very concerned. So Richard first says, well, okay, what if this perfect being, a God that was love, he was this infinite love, and he loved the rest of us guys that aren't? Well, that would be kind of a deprivation. He'd never get any reciprocity. So developing this notion of reciprocity, he said, let's say, wouldn't it be better if he could fully give and fully receive this love? And so he says, well, there you need the Son. The Father must be able to fully express himself. I think Father Weinandy put it like, how did he put it? In full act, giving the full act of all that he is to the Son, and the Son returns that to the Father. So that's the first step in his argument. Second step in his argument is that, well, you can get two people and they're so locked into each other they don't see anything else. They're just locked in with each other. A French writer called it an égoïsme à deux, a coupled egoism for two. Imagine a married couple that just says, well, we don't want to have any kids. We want to just keep dating till we're 52, or something, So I'm afraid there's a lot of people like that right now, but that would be locked in. It would be a locked in love. So he said we have to open the love, and so he said the love of the Father is not just inside the Father, and it's not just inside the Son, the love of the Son for the Father. The love that they have is so real that the reality is between them, and that reality between them, that betweenness, is the reality of the Holy Spirit, which is the person. And that's the best I can do in a quick summary for three, Sister. Okay, thank you.
Just curious, excuse me, just curious what your insight is into Matthew 24:36, where it speaks about knowledge that is known to the Father but not the Son.
Ooh, okay, through the slider. Okay. All right, yeah.
It was not meant to be a
No,
slight.
it's a great question, and it's a fair, thank you for it. I think that it's sometimes helpful to say that, the church said it, that the human Jesus was really human. You can't deny the human Jesus. The people who denied the human Jesus were the first heretics. They were the Gnostics, in around 140 AD. So the church is saying, look, he really was really God, really man. So the human Jesus has a role to play, and sometimes, as you read the gospel stories, it seems like he's not. Sometimes it seems like he has the full knowledge of God, and sometimes it's like, well, don't worry, this death of Lazarus isn't going to die. Don't worry about that. And then he does, and so forth. Well, no, I wasn't carrying it. I was not going post-ascension. No, I think that's a game changer. But during the incarnational state, the unique time of the incarnation, he really is divine, and he really is human. And when you look at Gethsemane, and he throws himself on the ground, and he's stressed, and he's saying, I don't want to do it. By the way, I love him more for that, not less. If he was dancing in Gethsemane, it would have been a very different gospel. He wasn't doing that. He said, I don't want to do it. But he said, I'm going to do it. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. This is greatness of the human Jesus there. So we need both. We need the humanity and we need the divinity. And we need them together, unified in one person.
Please join me in thanking Professor Rolnick.